So happy safety stay. What did you say? Is it always this crowded?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is the attendance register. This is a copy of today's lecture. Well, part of it. Part of it, not the whole thing. So today's lecture is actually very exciting. But I would like to thank Adeline for coming and inviting me here to talk about unit integration testing. The thing that's so exciting, by the way, does everybody know who I am? Bob Laramie, just in case. So I used to teach this module and CS230 in its entirety. And I'm the reason you have these strange courseworks, teamwork, well, not the only reason. But you have this amazing group works where you do a partial implementation, do a swapping, and then you continue on and then do an individual re-engineering. So I'm partially responsible for that. So you can thank me at the end. Anyway, I really love this module and I love CS230. They're the best modules in the second year. No, easy, no question. And they're the most practical, they're the most applied. So everything you learn in CS230 and CS235, you will need and use if you enter the software engineering industry or profession, which is not true about all the modules. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about unit and integration testing. You'll notice there aren't that many slides because we're going to go through the slides quickly and then get to a real example rather than just looking at slides. Thank you very much. So testing, you guys already know this, but just as a refresher, testing can happen at any stage of the software engineering lifecycle, right? It can happen, so these are the stages of the software engineering lifecycle, and testing can happen at all, and happens at all stages if we're doing a good job, right? And the earlier the testing is started, the better the end result will be, right? This is just a brief sort of context of testing. So testing at the problem statement level or the requirement specification level is basically asking the question, are we solving the right problem? Right? That's a dialogue with the client. Right? That's also testing. So to perform testing also in the beginning stages of the requirement specification level, we perform interviews with potential users and clients, and we perform so-called walkthroughs, which I'm sure Dan Archibald covered in detail. Like where you have screenshots of the software you're proposing and what happens when you click on different buttons in the screenshots, what is the next screen going to look like, and so on. And if you perform these tests, everything else will be better. At the design phase, you have prototyping, again, where you build a mock system and you imitate the behavior of the system without the functionality. Right? That's at the design phase. That's also a sort of testing. And then we have, this is what we're talking about today, testing at the implementation phase. And that's two approaches are unit testing and integration testing, two aspects. We're going to talk about those, and then we're going to talk about a real-life example first. And this is what people usually think of when they hear the word testing, they think of this stage that happens after everything else. So there's a problem statement, a requirement specification, design implementation phase, and then they think testing comes at the end and there's nothing before. That's not a fully informed picture of testing. Right? If we ignore all the testing prior, then we're not going to have as good of a product. Basically, the further down in the development you go, the more expensive testing becomes and the more difficult it is. Right? So the earlier stages are very good. And this is crucial. And I just mentioned one other thing. It's not really depicted very well in this diagram, but there's a maintenance phase. It really should be its own box. It should be a box like this big at the bottom, the maintenance phase. Because that is where the most work is, the most bug fixing, and the most money is. So it's very costly, the maintenance. So the maintenance cost is greater than all the other costs combined, right? And the time and investment spent on maintenance is huge. It's not depicted very well in this diagram. I really need to update that. Right? I think we're all very familiar with this, right? We're always downloading patches and hot fixes and stuff like that. The last time I installed Microsoft Windows for a friend of mine, maybe 2 years ago. I don't use Windows, but it took about an hour or something, and he said, "Oh, thank you so much, Bob, for reinstalling Windows," because his machine just stopped working and got too many viruses. He couldn't do anything, so we had to do a clean reinstall from scratch, which you have to do with Windows sometimes, right, every year or two. I said, "Thank you so much, Bob, for cleaning the disk and reinstalling Windows. And now I have a functional computer again." I said, "Mark, we're not done yet. We have to do the updates after you reinstall Windows." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "How long is that going to take?" I said, "It's going to probably take a few more hours." So I said, "Sorry, you have to wait." And so we installed and hit the updates. And then we got this message, like Microsoft is preparing to install 200 and something updates to your operating system. And then it just, for another 2 hours. Anyways, that's down the maintenance side. And actually, the amount of data that you end up downloading exceeds the original operating system that you installed in the first place. Right? That's nice that I have this little message. Anyways, I'm rambling. So what is unit testing? So it's really simple. Does anybody already know what unit testing is? Have you guys heard of that before? Excellent. So you know that in Java you can add a main method to every class and every object, right? And unit testing is adding a method, for example, a main method in a class, and then in that main method calling every method in the class with valid and invalid data, input parameters, and testing the individual methods, right? So step one, add a main method to your Java classes. In C++, you'll have to choose a different strategy, like adding a method called unit tests. Right? Instantiate the class in your main method. Call all methods in your class with both valid and invalid input parameters. That's the basic idea. And demonstrate that your class works to the others. That's important for your group work. So you can use these unit tests and main methods to tell your colleagues, hey, my class works. I've got these unit tests to demonstrate that it actually works, to avoid any conflicts in your groups. Right? And today, We're gonna look at a real world example, by the way. What is integration testing? So integration testing is testing more than one class at the same time, right? Or the combination of classes and objects, right? So we can introduce a testing class. The testing class instantiates all the classes that it wants to test, right? This is sometimes called a test harness. You probably heard the phrase test harness. And then the testing class calls all the public methods with both valid and invalid input parameters. See if you can break it. You want to see if you can break it. And sometimes the test harness or the integration testing class calls all the individual class unit tests. That's a common thing too. So start by calling all the unit tests and then do some integration testing. And there's a file called textfieldDemo.java as an example if you want to see that. We're also going to look at an example today. And that's it for the slides on testing and unit testing. Cool, isn't it? So you all have a copy of something like this, 12 concise coding conventions, or some coding conventions used in the module. Yeah. And there are many, many books on these topics, by the way. Right? Many, many books. These are just two interesting books if you're interested to learn more about that topic. So we're going to look at a real world example. I brought in the world's fastest laptop. So what is the real world example? I prefer to show demos rather than slides in this module. It's nice to see actual programs running with actual code rather than just a bunch of slides. Probably you guys think the same thing. That's what my psychic powers are telling me, at least. So this is a true story, as opposed to all the other stories. This is a true story. So I don't remember the exact year, probably sometime around 2009-ish. I got a phone call from an actual client, so to speak. A woman, her name is Megan Haley, that works for an association called the IEEE Computer Society. So you guys, has anybody ever heard of the IEEE Computer Society before? It's similar to the British Computing Society, but it's a lot bigger. It's an international, worldwide society. It's like the global version of the British Computing Society. Anyway, she was trying to put together a conference program. Right? Conferences have programs, and they have a list. The programs have lists of papers and presentations in them. And they have this information, actually. Here's the information that some of the conference programs have. It's a spreadsheet, right? And it has a bunch of papers in it, right? These papers are all publications, published papers, right? And each published paper has a paper ID, a paper title, right? You guys haven't done this yet. You haven't published research papers, but you've seen books before, right? Published books. It's the same thing. But they're short, 10 pages instead of 100 or 200. Each paper has an abstract. Each paper has some keywords. Magic ball. We're scrolling. We're scrolling to the right eventually. Each paper has some keywords. Each paper has a starting page, so when it actually gets printed, it's in a book, so to speak, and it has a starting page, the page you turn to. It has a so-called page range, the number of pages it takes up. And then there's an author. There's a first author, and there's their first name. There's another author, and it's the first author again with their surname. So the author's first names and surnames are printed, and their affiliation, so where they work. And then there could be a second author, right? Same information. There could be a third author. We don't know how many authors there are going to be. There could be anywhere from 1 to 100, right? And you'll notice some of the rows turn empty, right? As we keep scrolling. So there's a fifth author in some of the papers, there's a sixth author, and so on. So the client said, Bob, I have this spreadsheet full of paper information about papers that we're publishing. Right? This is an example. I need to convert this information to XML format. It's in Excel format or spreadsheet format, and I need a version that's in XML format. Can you help me? That was the client's request. That's a real thing that happens. What do you guys think I said? No. Well, okay. Imagine you wanted to help this person. What would you do? What's the first thing you would do if you wanted to help this person? Besides saying, maybe. What's the first thing you would do? This is a real thing that happened, a real life scenario. What would you do? Because you're a computer scientist now. People are gonna call you on the phone and ask you for favors all the time. You know, it's part of the amazing thing about being a computer scientist. Any ideas? What? I'm trying to do a screen capture. Doesn't seem to want to work. So the first thing you would do is open up Excel and say, oh, maybe there's an export function to do this already. Like file, export, and see if one of the options is XML. Right? That's the first thing you would do. Right? So that's what I did. I said, maybe Excel already has that function built in. At that time, it did not. Right? So what's the second thing that you try? Exactly. What's your name? Jens. Exactly. Jens. Janis. Okay. Janis. It's not Janis, is it? Janis.
Yeah.
So that's the second thing you do. You Google, right? Excel format to XML format, something like this, to see if an existing program is already there, ready to use and solve the problem, right? That's step 2. So that's what I did. I said, okay, Excel doesn't seem to have the capability, so we will see if there's an existing program, because there are lots of existing programs that do conversions back and forth, right? So I tried that, and I couldn't find anything. Remember, this is back in 2009-ish. So I thought, okay, it looks like I'm going to have to write a program to do this, right? And I was teaching software engineering at the time. So I thought, okay, if I have to write the program, I'll write the program, but I'll try to do it in such a way that I can actually present this program as a tool or something that can be used in the software engineering class as an example of an actual program. So that's what we're going to look at. So, assuming I can quit, I would like to try to do a screen capture, but it doesn't seem to want to cooperate. Let's try it again. So the input data is this spreadsheet, right? Let's try it one more time. I see. So it looks like it started and then it stopped. Now we're going to see if we can start it up again. Now, anybody know what step one would be for this process? By the way, there is a challenge that we're confronted with immediately.
I mean, is it going to be like an Excel format?
Correct. That's a problem, isn't it? It's an Excel format. An Excel format is closed, right? It's owned by a private company, and that wants to rule the world and keep everything a secret.
It's not as an Excel file.
Exactly. Exactly. So step one is to take the Excel format and convert it to an open format. In this case, we chose CSV, comma, separated values. So it's a text file, and every value is separated by a comma, right, into text. So that's step one. Now let's see. Now the program is called CSV to XML.java, and there's a copy of this. There's a copy of this on Blackboard. If there isn't already there, just let us know and we'll put a copy there. There's also a copy on my webpage. Now because I did this with some foresight, I thought, oh, this will be an interesting case study for software engineering, for example. Instead of well, two things are unusual about this. One is you don't usually see useful programs that do something. You usually see sort of toy programs that are not useful. So this is one of the few times where you see an actual program that does something useful for a client, and you see the whole thing. That's unusual. It might be the only time in your bachelor's degree that you see this. The second thing, now this is even more unusual, the second thing is, in those rare occasions when you can see a program that's working, somebody presents it to you. It's not going to happen very often. But in those rare instances when it does happen, usually you're only going to see the finished product. You're not going to have any information about how we got from the beginning, 0, to the end. Right? You just see the finished product. Boom, here's the solution or a solution. So with some foresight, thinking this will make a good case study, I thought I'm going to write down notes that show all the intermediate steps that I went through to get to the end results. Like starting with 0, what are the stages that this software goes through in order to get to the product that we can use. So I wrote down notes. And you can see them here. We're going to go over those right now, actually. So you've all seen JavaDoc already, right? It's called CSV to XML. Does anybody know why it's called CSV to XML? Yeah, that's right. But there are a whole series of format conversion programs already. Like one's called PS to PDF, and there are lots. And they come with the Linux operating system usually, if anybody uses Linux. So I've just named it in that spirit. You know, I used to use them all the time, and so this is another one that does that. Before I forget, by the way, you can now in Excel take an Excel spreadsheet and export it to XML format. It won't do as good of a job as this one does. Why do I mention that? It's because they were working on it at the same time I was. How funny is that? That's very funny. I mean, it's quite a coincidence. Okay, so this was in the year 2011. So I take my 2009 back. And if you want a reference, this is where I started. So I've been doing Java programming for a long time, not full time. But even as someone with lots of development experience, including in industry, the first thing I do when I need to do anything is I grab a book off the shelf, my programming reference book. I encourage you guys to also use program reference books. So the first thing I did was I grabbed my book called Java for Programmers by Untitled, and I turned to page 532. And I'll explain why I did that. But if you're looking for a good reference book, this is a very good one, right? This is the brief description, a program that demonstrates reading text from a file and then writing it to an XML file in XML format. The program is run by issuing this command, right? Java CSV to XML, and then you can give it an input file if you want, right? Where input file is an input CSV file. The output file will have the same name, but with the XML file extension. The program name is inspired by the Unix/Linux family of programs that convert different file formats, like PS to PDF. So this is the really unusual feature. This is something that I've never seen before anywhere, and I think that you guys will never see this ever again. So this is it. It's the one time in your life you're ever going to see this. I've never seen it before, never. So I've seen it because I've seen my own example, but I've never seen anybody else ever do this. But I think it's very interesting, and the reason I did it is because I think it's very pedagogic. I think it's very instructive. Like what are the intermediate stages one might go through? How does a developer think in some ways? So I have this task. Write a program that converts CSV to XML. What do? So the first thing I did was I said, okay, I need text file input. I don't know how to write a program that reads in text off the top of my head. So I go to my book, grab it off the shelf, I turn to page 532 or whatever it was, and I look at the example about how to input text from a file. That was step one, because that's what I knew I had to do. Step two, whatever examples you see in a book, usually they're not conforming to very good coding conventions, right? So the second step was to convert the example given in the book to read text file, to read text to a file, to convert the code to conform to the coding conventions. In this case, it's Bob's concise coding conventions. Usually they're not conforming because if you're writing a textbook, the goals are different than actually writing a fully fledged piece of useful software. The goal is to write a compact, concise solution that fits on a single page, right? That's the goal. In software engineering, that's not the goal. Right? The goal is to write robust software that doesn't break. That's the goal. It does a certain job. And that means we follow coding conventions. So that was step 2. Step 3 was looking up in the same book how to pass input parameters to the program. I can't remember how to do that. I don't need to remember how to do that. Right? That's what a book is for. So I started to write the program, start the main method, read in the data, added a few methods. And then the class that's called CSV to XML, it started to get too big. After a while, you'll understand that a class can have too many methods, too many data members, private variables, and it has to be split up, right? Because if you spend too much time scrolling up and down and searching for things, searching for methods, searching for information, that's a sign. It's a sign that you need a new class to divide the responsibilities up, to decentralize the intelligence. So after working a little bit, I added a new class called publication that stores all the information about an individual publication, one of those rows in the spreadsheet, right? Because each one of those rows represents a publication. So there it is. We won't look at it just yet. Then it starts to get complicated. I even have a note. Starts to get complicated. I was using a program called Open Office at the time to look at the spreadsheet. Anybody ever used Open Office before? And I noticed that when I exported the Excel file to CSV, Open Office added double quotes to every string. So it would add double quotes to the paper ID, then print out the paper ID, finish with double quotes, then put a comma, and so on. So every term was surrounded.
Was it a bug of program or was it intended to do double quotes?
It's because there are no official standards for CSV files. Like you can put quotes around the stuff, or you don't have to. There's no standard that says you got more.
And you can do double quotes as well.
So if you're writing a program that converts to CSV, you can add the quotes, or you don't have to add the quotes.
Yeah, but probably you just said you had double quotes at the end of the beginning, right?
That's right.
So that was not intended. The intended was how we want it.
Well, I don't know what the intention was of the original.
Also, another question. Before you know that, so you were writing this program as you went along, basically, as you
That's right.
So you know that was a bad practice.
Mm-hmm.
Since first you have to decide to make a sketch, I guess, design, so you know, I've been told it's a bad practice to just
start
writing and I've got a problem. I'll figure it out.
along the way. Yes.
Also, another question: you didn't constrain by time, I guess, because you didn't ask by your position. And did you write the program first that was targeted for that specific file, since you already have?
Yes, it had to be for this specific file and this specific information. But it had to work on all the files with this information. So I would get several files with that information. So I knew that the column headers would stay the same, but the rows would change. So the first question is, you are correct. Theoretically, I should have sat down with a pencil and paper and wrote out the design first. Here's why I didn't. Well, one, I wasn't getting paid, but I didn't know how big the problem was. But I probably should have put more time and investigation. If this was a paying client and this was a formal contract, I should definitely have put more investigation into the complexity. How complicated is this? How much effort is it going to take? I had no idea. I was making the same mistake that most people make, actually. I was imagining something simple, like, oh, I'm just going to write a little program that gets this job done. And I think it's, like I thought, oh, maybe it will just be a few methods. So I sort of started with that naive attitude, that it would be simple, and I could just write a little program that gets the job done. And that's when I got to, that was step 3. Between step 3 and step 4, I realized, oh, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. Like I have too many methods in my CSV to XML class, right? These are the methods. You know, there's a reasonable number there, but it was now because I split it up, but it was getting to be too complicated. Now, with some experience, you will start to get intuition at development time. So I'm doing design retroactively now. That's what's happening. So I started my implementation, and then I'm like, oh, there's a design problem here because there are too many responsibilities in this class. I need to start thinking more seriously about the design and introduce a new class to handle all the data associated with a single publication. So it's retroactive design. I could like call that agile development, the circular one, where you're always looking at the requirement specification, doing a little bit of design, doing some implementation, some testing, and so on in an iterative style. So I sort of skipped the design phase in the first instance, and I went back to it. And I go back to it again, by the way. I haven't finished the discussion. So I noticed that was a good comment, by the way. If anybody has other comments or questions, just interrupt at any time. So OpenOffice adds the double quotes. And then I notice, oh, I need to remove these double quotes from the XML file. I don't want strings with double quotes on the XML file, so I need a method that removes them. And so I Googled, first I started to write my own procedure that searches a string for double quotes and then removes them. But it started to get complicated. For example, like, what if there are quotes in the string that should be there? Right? You need to write an exception, right, to make sure that you're not removing quotes that are supposed to be there, and so on. And I realized, oh wow, this is starting to get more complicated than I want it to be. Like, I thought this was going to be a simple job. So then I Googled how to remove quotes from strings and so on. And I still got more complicated things. So now what I did was I Googled how to input CSV formatted files. Because I decided removing the strings was getting complicated, or the quotes rather. Let's see if there's a solution already there out there that Google knows about. So I found something. It's called OpenCSV jar. It's an OpenCSV library, Java library, that handles all the string processing for CSV files. So it will remove the quotes. So I imported that library, and it made my life. At that point, that was huge. That was huge. It sounds simple when we're talking about it, but as soon as I Googled it and started to write my own procedures to do it, it wasn't so simple anymore. I could have done it, it just would have taken a long time. So I import the OpenCSV-2.3.jar. The next step was looking up how to output a text file to an XML file and integrate into the existing program. And because this was a real project, so this was a real client that really needed a service and they really needed me to deliver. And it shouldn't be rubbish. Yeah, it has to work because she had a body, a group of people she had to report to as well. And I agreed, okay, I'm going to do this and it should work. So I bought a book. It's not absolutely necessary, but I bought an XML book on XML standards just to make sure I was outputting an official XML standardized file format. You're going to see all this, by the way, when we actually look at the code. So that was the next step. Look up how to output text to an XML file. Then the next sort of complication was figuring out how to handle multiple keywords and authors. So each row has a number of keywords, but we don't know how many in advance. We just don't know. There could be 0 keywords, there could be 10. We don't know. So we have to figure out how to handle that. How to handle the authors. We don't know how many authors there are going to be in advance either. So we have to figure that out. We're going to see the solution to that. But that was a step. That was like, oh, I have to stop and figure this out. How am I going to handle unknown numbers of keywords and unknown numbers of authors? And then, so that was it. Steps 1 through 8, those were the sort of intermediate steps that the program went through. Actually, I left one out. I added another class called author. So publication got complicated, and when I was looking into this problem about how to handle multiple authors, at that point I realized this is slightly more complicated, and really there should be an author object that carries the responsibilities of handling individual authors, right? Surnames, first names, and affiliations. So it's a simple class. Those are the basic 8 steps, and then I delivered my product, so to speak, and then came the change requests, right? As soon as you deliver a project, the client's going to see it, and they're going to, oh no. They're going to just say, oh, I need these changes, those change requests. So the change requests are very, if you follow good design principles and you follow good coding conventions, which not many people do, by the way, then the change requests are very easy. Very easy. If you don't follow good design principles and you don't follow good conventions, the change requests can be very difficult. Right? So in the original version, I stored all the publications in a single XML file, right, just like the input. But in the change requests, the change request was, please put every publication in its own XML file. It was really, really easy to change request to. to accommodate, as you'll see the way this has been designed. And then there was a change request about the names of the files. The names of the files, I think the original names of the output files were the IDs, paper IDs, but that was changed to starting page and page range, something like that. It's also a very easy change request. And let's just have we'll wrap up, but let's just have a very quick preview of the world of Bob's project here. We'll look at the main method. We'll just look at the main method. Right? There it is. By the way, this can also be thought of as integration testing, because we're testing 3 objects, CSV to XML, publication.java, and author.java. So all the methods that have this testing flag that I can turn on and off, right? That's the default input file name if there's none. If there's no input file name supplied. There's the method that looks for the input file name. And then there's the main method. So instantiate a new CSV to XML object, open the input file, read in the publications, and then close the input file. Don't forget. With cool comments. Then that's stage 1, read in the data. Stage 2 is write the data. Application, open the output file with the file name, write it to XML format. That was the version that writes all the publications into one file. And this is the modified method that writes each publication to its own file. And then close the output file. Beautiful, isn't it? I know that's what you're thinking, wow, that's beautiful.
It probably was not simple.
It is beautiful. It's beautiful. If I gave this to you and said, please modify it and update it, you'd be like, thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. Anyways, we'll go over it in detail next time. Any questions or comments so far? So next time means next Tuesday. Happy St. George's Day. Oh no, St. David's. St. David's.